All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight and coming out on your Tuesday as we slowly get back to our in-person events. It's been a long time, but we're definitely glad to have all of you here. Pretty big turnout tonight. And yeah, we're excited for our panel that we have for Harvesting Your Wealth. So just real quick, going to run through some announcements. If you've never been here before, real quick, we Quest Trust Company, largest self-directed IRA company here with over 20,000 active investor clients. As you can see, $2 billion in assets under management, quite a few stats up there, but the most important thing to be aware of is that this presentation, like all of our other presentations, it's for education only. So we do not provide any tax, legal, or investment advice. We do recommend that you seek some sort of professional counsel if you are looking to get some actual financial advice. But like I said, we do host a lot of educational events and we love putting education on for you guys. So here are just some of the additional classes and webinars that we have. Every Tuesday and Saturday, we have webinars for you guys. So at noon, you can log on. We bring guest speakers out. We have some of our executives that speak. And it's a vast kind of broad topics from real estate investing strategies to self-directed IRA strategies and everything in between. If you're looking for networking, kind of like the event tonight, but a little bit more in the comfort of your own home, we do have our virtual happy hour as well. That is on the first and third Wednesday of every month. So this one is going to be once a month, that one's twice a month. So lots of opportunities for networking as well. And then as you can just see here, if you haven't been able to catch them live, we do restream all of those on our YouTube and Facebook pages as well. So for next month, kind of sticking with the themed events, we're going to be doing speed networking at our Christmas Self-Directed Ira Social. So that one's going to be Tuesday here in our office as well. Same time as this one, just a little bit of a different format. We're going to be doing speed networking instead of a panel. Question? Yes. Yeah, so the question from the audience for those online was, is there a date? So that is going to be December the 14th. It's a Tuesday at 6:30. And if you do want to get registered, we have quite a few Quest staff in the back. If you don't want to do it yourself, we can take care of it for you. But I saved the best for last. This is probably our biggest online event that we have done all year. It's going to be QuestCon Forecasting 2022. So everything from what you learned in 2021, some of the strategies that worked, some that didn't, what you're going to take into 2022, and how to really scale your business and build wealth in your self-directed IRA. So we have over 20 guest speakers from all across the nation that are going to be joining us. Again, that one is online as well. So if you just want to sit back, relax on the couch, we've got you covered. Early bird pricing, unfortunately, is no longer available, but maybe we can do something for you guys. If you do want to get registered for that and get a ticket, we have Katie in the back with an iPad and she can get you signed up. Alrighty, so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get the event started. I'll give you guys this mic here. But tonight's event is really going to just be about how these panelists and these real estate experts were able to harvest their wealth, strategies that they were using to build wealth in and outside of their retirement accounts. So we'll go ahead and start with Steve. We have Steve. Oh, we're going to start down there? Okay. So we have Ken down there, we've got Joel in the middle, and we have Steve here closest to myself. All of them have a wealth of knowledge, and we've brought them out to kind of share some of their experiences and tips and tricks on how they were able to get started. So Ken, do you want to introduce yourself?
Is it working? Mic working? Hey folks, my name is Ken Harris. I've been in the real estate business for a very long time. I got my license in 1971, became a broker in 72. I'm pretty much full-time in real estate since then. Some residential, mostly commercial, some of that very specialized. And the last 6 or 7 years, the focus has been much more on investing. I did make a few investments along the way, but they were almost by accident. But I've been around the real estate business a long time and around investing, mostly passive investing, for about the last 6 years.
All right. Thank you very much, Ken. Thank you, Quest, for having us here. My name is Joel Fine. I am a California refugee. I moved here about 18 months ago to Leander. At the time I was in California, I was doing real estate part-time, and I was a W-2 employee. But when I moved to Texas, I gave up my W-2 job and focused full-time on real estate. I'm now a full-time syndicator. I mostly do value-add multifamily, but I also do some land development. I'm in about, I think, 8 deals now as a sponsor, 6 deals of multifamily and 2 land development deals. I'm also a very active passive investor. If you'll forgive the oxymoron, I do a lot of passive investing. I think at last count, I was in a little more than 24 deals spread across 7,000 doors in 7 different states. So I do both active and passive investing in real estate, and that's my full-time thing now.
Great, thank you. My name is Steve Sabaji. I am the IRA specialist here at Quest Trust Company in the Austin office. If you would like a quick definition, by the way, of pressure, it's being introduced as a real estate expert while you're sitting next to Ken and Joel, by the way. Now, the expertise that I'm going to lend tonight has to do with the investment aspect from our clients. I've been in the financial services industry for quite a while, specifically in the area of retirement planning, employer plans, and personal plans. And now I've transitioned over to self-directed IRAs. And it's been a great experience so far, and really looking forward to the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. So as you can tell, we have decades of knowledge up here. So just real quick from the audience, with a raise of hands, how many of you guys are real estate investors yourselves? Awesome. Love it. We love that. So kind of along those lines, we have quite a few real estate investors here. We've got them up on our panel. How did you guys get started and involved with real estate investing?
Take these answers in order. And back in 1973, I did what today would be referred to as a duplex hack. The term wasn't invented in 1973, but I bought a duplex. I was a veteran. I used my VA to buy a duplex, Scenic Brook West. For those of you not familiar with it, think of Highway 71 West and Highway 290 West. That's the Y that's sometimes referred to out there. Scenic Brook is west of 71. And there was fairly new development, lots of new homes. And I found a duplex in there, and I bought it VA and lived in one side, rented out the other side. And that's when I first got started in real estate.
So for many years, I was very active in stock investing. And for the most part, I was just kind of plowing my savings into index funds and leaving them alone. Several years ago, my wife and I decided that we were planning to move to Austin. I mentioned that I came from California. But at the time, we knew that it was going to take a little while for us to get things lined up that we could make the move. And so what we decided to do was to buy a property here as sort of a hedge against the possibility that either the California market would collapse or the Austin market would explode, a little like it actually did over the last year and a half. So that was sort of our protection against, hey, at a minimum, we'll be able to move into the place we've just bought for investment purposes. But otherwise, it's just a way of protecting ourselves and making sure that the plan we've laid out can work. Once I bought that property, I think that sort of opened my eyes to the possibilities, helped me understand what the numbers looked like better in real estate, and understand a little bit better what the combination of cash flow and appreciation can do over long periods of time. And so that first house was my gateway drug that pulled me in full time into real estate.
And again, I want to speak more from the perspective of the clients that I interact with. And I think Joel put it really well. It seems like the initial entry, I know for myself and for people I talk to, is that first house that they bought. That's kind of where they really get the sense of the power of real estate and what it can do, and then want to transfer that over to the retirement side for themselves as well. And it's probably a theme you might hear me say a lot tonight. It's diversification. You know, it's that way that you can truly get beyond just what the market in itself offers, and a way to, you know, really broaden your horizons, spread out the risk, and, you know, find the returns that you're looking for, regardless of the economy, regardless of the markets.
Awesome. Thank you for those answers. So as you were getting started, as you were learning, I'm sure there were some mistakes along the way, right? How do we learn if we don't make mistakes? What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned, or, you know, that you see clients learn from along the way in that career? And how can that be a teachable moment, you know, for others here tonight?
So I guess one of my early lessons. So before I started getting into large scale multifamily, I was buying smaller properties, duplexes, triplex, and a couple of quads. And one of my earliest properties helped me learn the lesson of don't buy in the hood. So this was in Cleveland. I was buying strictly for cash flow. Cleveland's not an appreciation market, but it can be a great cash flow market. And I found a property, it was a quad, that looked like it wasn't in a bad neighborhood, but in hindsight, it turns out it wasn't in a great neighborhood. And so that particular property presented a lot of challenges to me. That the tenants that we were able to attract never really were the quality of tenants that one would want in one's home. The property didn't appreciate, took a lot of repairs to get it working, get it functional, and then continued to have repair issues all along the way. And so, you know, that trade-off of quality versus potential cash flow and inexpensiveness, I think, was an important early lesson that I picked up on.
Very good. Thanks. They gave us clues on some. And when I looked at this one, the thing that occurred to me was more along the lines of what drove me along. And the things I learned along the way, one of the more important was focus and persistence. I recognize that even back in the residential days, I stayed south of the river. And for those of you who are new to Austin, you don't really know what that means. But if you were here in the 70s, you would understand. There were plenty of people that they didn't cross the river. There's no way that they were going to go to South Austin. But I chose to focus down that direction. And as I progressed and got into commercial real estate, I did the same thing. I focused in the type of properties and what particular field I was in. Mostly for users. 7-Eleven turned out to be a customer of mine. And I continued that along the way. I mentioned the fact that I found some specialization, and I was talking with somebody earlier, Rob, it was you I was talking with earlier, and I mentioned the savings and loan crisis of the mid-'80s. Those of you who were not here and did not live it, you have no concept, and you owe it to yourself to do some research and read about the S&L crisis, the savings and loan crisis of the mid-'80s. I didn't make a living in real estate for several years, but I still owned a lot of real estate, and I owed a lot of money. Wasn't clear who I owed it to because the bank had gone out of business. And my partners and I, we finally settled with the Resolution Trust Corporation. But the point is that when a new opportunity came along, and this was finding locations for cellular telephone towers and antennas, I chose that as an area of specialization and spent 25 years doing that, and it worked very, very well. I didn't do much else. That was all I did. But by the focus and just staying with it, and it worked out real well. So focus and persistence.
And I think I would echo a lot of what was said, in that the thing that I see that people, you know, again, misjudge or miscalculate is gauging the market that they're in. And I hope this will be a bit of the conversation we have, because in my experience, I've been hearing a lot of different opinions about the Austin market versus the Dallas market versus the Houston market and other places throughout the country. And so, you know, I think where, again, people have sort of made missteps is not really having an understanding as to what the capital costs will be going in and what the return is going to be on the backside coming out. And I think, again, here it's very different from what I'm hearing than other places, even close in this state, not necessarily all the way to another major urban area. So I think that's, again, the thing that a lot of people have to look at on the front end as they're going in.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to add a tidbit as well. I think one thing that I see a lot of people kind of make mistakes with is they jump into investments too quickly. I think something that's a real big lesson is do your due diligence. Make sure that that's an investment that is going to be good. You've done your research on it. At least, if worse comes to worse, you can feel confident that you did the best that you could. So those are great. Thank you so much for all of those. Going to get a little bit more audience participation. How many of you invest with a self-directed IRA? Okay. A little bit less, but still a lot. We love to see that. So we're going to switch gears and talk kind of a little bit about investing with your self-directed IRA. So for you gentlemen here, if you have one, how did you get involved with self-directed IRAs? And for you, Steve, what kind of drew you to the self-directed IRA world, and what do you see other clients, why they choose to do this?
So remember my word, diversification. That's really kind of where it begins. Again, having been in the industry for a long time, this is where a lot of people for many, many years have been talking about going to. And I think, that there hasn't necessarily been the widespread awareness of self-directed IRAs and the potential, but I think it's really starting to grow now. And so coming from more of a traditional background of investments, it's really what drew me. And I find it's really what draws a lot of people into the self-directed world. And again, it's that they want to get away from some of the more traditional investments, which at the end of the day, they're not as diversified as they think they are for a variety of reasons. But it's also that ability for them to invest in what they really know. They have that opportunity, as Sarah said, to do their due diligence, to really analyze the investment that they've got before them. And as a result of that, there is that potential that they will not be surprised, or at least as there's not that potential for surprise for what the investment could do over time.
So I do a great deal of investing with my retirement funds. To expand a little bit on something Steve said, I think a big component of that is awareness. For many years, I didn't even understand what a self-directed IRA was or that it existed. I mentioned earlier I was mostly in stock index funds. And so my perception was that a self-directed IRA was one that allowed me to choose whichever mutual fund I wanted. But in fact, it's much broader than that. As Quest will tell you at length, a self-directed IRA will allow you to invest in all kinds of different asset classes. So that's what I do with my funds. I've got a solo 401k, which is fairly similar to a self-directed IRA. So I'm using the term generically for retirement funds. But once I understood what I could do with that, what flexibilities I had, then I was all in. So over the last few years, I've been slowly taking money from my rollover IRA, which is all in stocks, and shifting it over into syndications. And so that's one of the areas in which I'm an active passive investor, in the sense that I'm moving my money over to other people's syndications and investing in those syndications as a way of diversifying. And I'm diversifying not only across asset classes, meaning stocks versus real estate, but also within real estate across different asset classes. I've got money in biotech research labs, in apartment developments, in A, B, and C class apartments across geographies. I've got money in half a dozen different states. So for me, it's been a fantastic tool to help diversify my assets, reduce my risk, but still maintain a good, healthy return on my money.
Certain advantages to, but one of the disadvantages, essentially, I was retired when I learned about self-directed IRAs. So I don't have a whole lot, although I do have a self-directed solo 401k. And I was not, I wasn't doing a lot. I didn't have a lot of money in an IRA or 401k once I came to the point where I was investing in the syndications that we're talking about now. All I have is one big loan that I made at the beginning out of my solo 401k. So I don't do a lot with mine, but I can tell you for sure, I've seen a lot of people, and I have some very good friends that do a great deal with theirs. We were talking earlier tax, and definitely be aware of solo 401k. Do you know, can you explain why on solo 401k you don't concern yourself with UBIT other than the fact that that's the rule? Why is it the rule? Do you know?
You're asking me to read into the mind of the IRS.
Okay. All right. So for whatever reason, solo 401k is a better real estate in your retirement account because you don't have the UBIT tax. However, I've seen it explained, and from a percentage standpoint, it doesn't turn out to be very many dollars. Do you know approximately what that is?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's a conversation that we always like to have because of where it does and where it doesn't apply. So UBIT, just to define some of the terminology, is unrelated business income tax. And there's a subset of UBIT, which is unrelated debt financing income. And so there's a distinction between the two. But basically, it's related only in so much as your retirement account is utilizing debt leverage. So in a case of where if you're investing in real estate and you're owning an asset outright, none of it would even be applicable. So it's only the case of where you might be utilizing debt as a way to leverage your IRA to potentially get more for your money. Now, the one thing too that I would just add in there is in terms of the terminology, there's a distinction between the UBIT and the UDFI. So with the 401k, it's really just the UDFI that you're avoiding, the debt financing income. The UBIT, which is related to a business, if you're running a business, regardless of whether it's in your 401k or your IRA, there is going to be applicable taxes. So that is one thing that you don't necessarily avoid altogether. But to the greater point that Ken was making, and this is something, again, when I look at it with people, I will tell them all the time, is just because UBIT may apply in the IRA doesn't mean it's a deal you shouldn't do. And again, when you start to look at how it's applied and what you can apply against it, the UBIT can end up being virtually insignificant. And again, maybe that's easy for me to say, but again, anecdotally, I've seen cases of where people might be using 60% debt on a purchase within their self-directed IRA, but then they're allowed to utilize the standard deductions, the things like depreciation and interest and so forth. And by the time you net it all out, it will end up, again, in many cases that I've heard and seen, very small as a consideration. And the other thing that I like to make very clear is that it's a tax that you personally do not pay. It's paid by your IRA. They're the ones that, so it's not going to bleed over into your personal tax situation and impact you in terms of pushing you personally into a higher tax bracket. So, again, this is a great conversation, and this is something we could probably do an hour or 2 hours on in and of itself. But, hopefully that just gives a little bit of an overview and some context to it. But it's a great point that always needs to be brought up, particularly if debt is going to be an element of the investing you do through your self-directed IRA. That is correct. The question was, would Quest cut the check? The answer is yes. It would be almost like any other type of directed payment that is made by the IRA account owner. But it's a separate filing that's done by the individual for their IRA. But it is something basically like property taxes or insurance or any other kind of payment that needs to be made by the IRA.
Okay, we have a question. Yes.
So the question was about passive investment versus active investment. And yes, there is the potential that you still are going to have the tax that's applicable, even if you are a passive investor in a multifamily deal. But yeah, the payment ends up being done the same way. Now, in terms of the application of the tax coming through the entity, that could be a little different. So that will vary with situation, but in terms of paying it, it's all basically the same.
Okay. So it sounds like we do want to get into some audience questions. So I just have one last one before we take it to those. Rounding it out, what advice would you have to new real estate investors or new self-directed IRA investors that want to grow their wealth? How would you present them with some advice?
My advice is similar to what you just got through saying. I'm going to use the term balance, but don't go too fast. Be careful about jumping into a deal too soon. Pay attention to what you're doing. And we just got through talking about one of the important subjects. There's a whole bunch of folks that I know that invested through their IRA funds into syndicated deals, and they were not aware of UBIT taxes. Now, we've talked about the fact they're not significant, but people should at least be aware of it. They should know about it. And so that's something you want to invest. But on the other hand, I have seen people get caught up in what I call, and we've all heard the phrase, analysis paralysis. They want to make certain they don't make a mistake. And so they don't do anything. You have to take a little courage, make your best judgment, and then take some action. So that's my advice to somebody that's new at doing this, is get lots of education. These folks do a great job. Opportunities for that. Look for opportunities and then take advantage of those better opportunities.
So one of my big learnings early on was that I don't actually have to do things by myself. So my initial investments were things that I could afford the down payment on. I could work directly with the bank as an individual, and I could purchase. So that's why I was doing duplexes and triplexes and quads, is because I could afford that myself. What I didn't understand is another one of those sayings you might have heard: real estate is a team sport. So finding people you can partner up with in some way can really accelerate your growth, as well as your ability to invest in different kinds of assets and to diversify your exposure. So that was, for me, a limiting belief that I managed to overcome and get rid of. And ever since then, I've been racing ahead. I think my strengths is finding excellent partners to work with. I find those partners and I persuade them somehow that I can add value to the partnership. And once I do that, then the combination is really powerful. And so that's sort of the fundamental lesson I would look to is don't be afraid to team up. Don't be afraid to partner up in all kinds of different ways that could work for you.
I think one thing that I've noticed as well is that there seems to be an assumption sometimes on the part of investors that using a self-directed IRA requires a lot of money from the beginning. And that if you are only making, those annual contributions, you're not going to be able to build up the money to really make a difference. And I think it goes back to the expertise that you have. And it's one of the virtues of the self-directed IRA is it lets you really invest in the things you know best. I've seen, again, anecdotally, a number of cases of where people have been able to utilize what I think would be relatively small amounts, either through types of deals that they're doing, or like Joel was saying, in partnering. There are a lot of creative ways that you can basically start with a little and end with a lot. Well, that was about all I had to say. So fortunate.
So this one, whoa, can you hear me? Obviously, yes, right? All right, well, we're going to take it to audience questions now. So if we do have a question from the audience, I have some Quest staff that will help me run this microphone around, I guess this microphone now, right? Okay, give me 1 second here. We're going to get a new mic fix. If you want to just speak into that one for just 1 minute.
Thank you. My first question is for Joel. Joel, is there a way for people to learn about your company and perhaps invest with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I can connect with you offline after the meeting and hand you a business card, but I've got a very primitive website up called lakelineproperties.com, and that'll at least allow you to send a message to me if you don't otherwise have my contact information. So thank you for the question.
All right, thank you.
Okay, more questions?
I got one.
I saw him first, and I'll give it to him. I'll come right back to you.
This is for anyone on the panel. Can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear it. For an investment where the investment goes up every year, funded by a IRA or a 401k, you have to do RMD on the fair market value each year, correct? So as it appreciates faster than your liquidity in the IRA, how do you pay the RMD if you don't have the money in there? There's got to be a way to keep it fair with the IRS. I mean,
Sure. So the question for those of you on, and perhaps those who maybe didn't hear it, was about RMDs for assets that you hold if you don't have the liquidity to meet the RMD. And interestingly enough, one thing that you actually are allowed to do is distribute a proportion of the asset itself without having to sell the asset in its entirety. So in essence, if you had a house and it was worth X and your RMD was Y, you could actually distribute a percentage of the asset equal to the RMD. Basically what it's doing is it's starting to split the title down. So a percentage stays in the ownership of the IRA, a percentage then becomes your personal property. Now, what's important too is that in doing so, it is still going to be governed by the rules of the IRA, meaning that you still wouldn't be able to utilize it in any kind of personal capacity, subject to the disqualified people and the prohibited transactions. But it would afford you the opportunity to really not have to just liquidate an asset outright purely for the sake of the RMD.
I can't imagine the
Absolutely. Yes. You still would have to pay taxes on the percentage, whatever the value of the percentage is, which again, you want to try to peg closely to whatever the RMD is. And it would be needing a hard appraisal in order to have that verified appropriately to the satisfaction of the IRS. But again, still something that you can do.
when you're invested in syndicated apartment complexes, I find it hard to believe that the syndicator would be keen on splitting up part of a.
I think what you would do is your interest in that syndication. You've put 50,000 in a deal, and you need to distribute 5,000. We'll say you can distribute to yourself an interest of $5,000 interest in your $50,000 you have invested in the syndicated deal. You would have to pay tax just like you would on any of your distribution. Does that make sense?
I never thought about it, but yes, I guess that if the IRS will live with it, I could live with it. But
And can I mean, this sounds silly, but I don't know the answer. Can you make a contribution necessary to cover the cash that's necessary for distribution?
If
Okay.
you got earned income, you could make a contribution.
Yeah, but if you don't have the money, that's a problem. But if you have the money, you could do that.
So
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
actually an approach that I was going to suggest is, so my dad is actually in that situation, and I help him manage his IRA assets. And the syndications I put him in typically have a 3 to 5 or maybe 5 to 7 year lifespan. So what I've done is I've had him set aside 7 years worth of RMDs in liquid assets, and the rest can potentially be invested in syndications. So over time, the syndications will go full cycle. They'll return the money. He'll have it back in his account as cash. And then he can decide, okay, at that time, do I need to set aside more cash for a future RMD, or can I reinvest it in a new syndication? So in the meantime, he's always got enough money that he knows he can be confident he'll cover the RMDs when the time comes.
is it possible for the IRA to borrow money from a third party at arm's length relationship? I realize that's probably a CPA question, but
Better question for one, but I'm sorry. Say it again. Can you borrow money?
can my IRA borrow money at arm's length, relationship, fair interest rate, with which then to have sufficient liquidity?
I mean, you're talking about still having overlapping assets ultimately at the end of the day. So in terms of what the benefit of that would ultimately be, I'm not sure it would satisfy the end goal. But what I did want to just kind of piggyback off of Joel, and again, get back to the theme I always have is the diversification, which is again, kind of what I think you were saying is, you do always want to have broad asset classes that you are utilizing. I was kind of initially answering the question from the standpoint that these were the only investments you had, but yeah, I mean, all the points that have been made here, really do bolster the point of how important it is not to go all in necessarily on one thing. But yeah.
Okay, thank you much.
But we're kind of in the weeds here, but let me touch on one more thing, which is if your IRA borrows money, I believe you're not allowed to personally guarantee it. And so that may become a challenge for you to find someone who's willing to loan your IRA money without a personal guarantee.
Thank you so much. Okay, I believe we had a question up here in the front.
Yeah, I just have a very basic question because it seems a lot of people here already have self-directed IRAs, but I don't have a self-directed IRA yet, but I do want to get one. If I do open one, can I roll my current Roth IRA into it without any sort of withdrawal tax negatives?
Great question. The answer is yes. Any kind of existing IRA that you have currently is something that's portable. It can be moved over to a self-directed IRA and a Roth IRA at that. So the thing that we always kind of joke about here is that you kind of just have to take self-directed out of the name, because an IRA is an IRA is an IRA. So they're always the same, whether it's here or whether it's at Fidelity or Vanguard or wherever. So it's very simple to open a Roth IRA here. An IRA transfer also is something it's not reported. It's not taxable. It basically is like it's moving it just simply from one IRA to another IRA, really with very little consequence at all. So yes.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question actually for Steve. My understanding is that if you have both a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA and you're rolling them into a self-directed format, you don't want to mix them. Is that accurate? You want to keep them separate?
It's always, good to, as you're making the transfers, to keep them separate. In fact, that is something you would have to do. So if you had a pre-existing Roth and you're opening a self-directed, it would go to a Roth. If it's a traditional, it would go to a traditional. Now, from that point, if you did want to consolidate, you always had the option of Roth conversion, where you can take that traditional money and put it into the Roth. But again, that's a longer conversation. There is tax implication that can go along with that. But again, that's a good point to make, is that everything does have to go, like account to like account. And I'll even add, the same is true on 401k rollover. There is now a lot of people who we see who have Roth 401k. And so Roth 401k definitely goes to Roth IRA, traditional to traditional.
Hey,
Awesome.
Rick?
Okay. It was my understanding that if you wanted to convert or roll over a traditional IRA to a self-directed IRA, and you would not yet reach the age of 59 and a half, that it was going to be treated as a distribution and you were going to pay tax on that.
So yeah, just to clarify, so if we're talking about doing an IRA transfer, regardless of age, and again, this is where, let's say my current IRA is at Fidelity and I want to move to Quest so I can self-direct. Basically, it's a very simple, straightforward process. I open my Quest account, then I work with Quest to initiate the transfer. We will take it up with Fidelity. Fidelity will then send the money to us. And again, regardless of your age, then there is no tax consequence. There's no tax reporting, anything of that nature. Now, there are, again, just some other kind of nuanced ways of doing it where tax reporting may become an issue, but it can ultimately also be offset. So, I mean, again, the transfer is really the just most basic, simple way of doing it, though. And again, it's something you can do regardless of age. You can do it as often as you want within a year. There's no kinds of restrictions on those IRA transfers. And again, there's no consequence from a tax standpoint.
I think the key is it's got to be a rollover. So it goes directly from one IRA to another, from custodian to custodian. It doesn't pass through your hands. Is that accurate?
Well,
Yeah.
just the terminology. This is where I really don't like the terminology. So what we're describing here is actually called IRA transfer. There is something called IRA rollover, and then there's something called direct rollover. Direct rollover is where it comes out of a qualified retirement plan, like a 401k. And it's a method where you can have the money come out without penalties, taxes, withholding, and it goes straight into your IRA. Transfer, IRA to IRA. And again, no reporting, no nothing. The IRA rollover is the indirect method. And again, I don't want to get too weedy here either. That's where it is technically a distribution. It will get reported by the custodian who has the money leave, but then it would be offset by the receiving custodian with a tax filing as well. And as long as the amounts match up, it's a wash. Yes, that is within the 60-day time frame that you have to get it out of, you can take it out of one IRA and you can get it into the next IRA. And it's important to note too, that is something where there is restrictions on your ability to do so. You can only do that once every 12 months, not every year. It's not a calendar year thing. So I can't do it in, December and then do another one in January. It's a calendar 12-month period that you are limited to do that within one time.
Okay.
I think one reason that I have seen just from investors is sometimes the rollover can be done quicker. There are some custodians who I put them into two categories. There are some that are very good and there are some that are not. There are some who will drag their feet. There are some who will make you go through some extra steps in order to get your money out of their institution. And sometimes if you're really in a hurry, you've got a deal that has to get taken care of, you need that IRA, you need to get it funded, it may be quicker to do the IRA rollover where it goes to you and then you can get it to us. And again, it's all situational. Companies like Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, they're great to work with. Got a couple of our transfer specialists here in the back who can probably give you the list of the good and the bad. But they see me a lot because I'm coming down saying, "Hey, where's the check? What's going on?" But yeah, I mean, they're just kind of all over the place.
So I got 2 or 3 really quick, easy questions. Can you buy cryptocurrency and or gold through your SDRA? And second is, what's a good option to place cash for short-term liquidity needs in the self-directed IRA?
Okay. So it's a kind of roundabout question with regard to crypto and buying crypto through self-directed IRA, which was the first part of Mark's question. So the answer is yes, you can do that. However, at Quest Trust Company at this time, our platform is not set up in order to do that itself. So through a Quest self-directed IRA directly, you would not be able to do so. There is a way in which it can be done. And again, this gets a little weedy. This becomes a longer conversation. It can be done by way of an entity. So if you were actually funding an entity through your self-directed IRA, it's pretty straightforward and pretty simple, because it's going to be the entity that's doing the transacting in the asset, not the IRA. So again, it's just subject to the rules of disqualified people and that kind of thing. Basically, the only thing an entity can't hold, or an IRA for that matter, is going to be life insurance and collectibles. Collectibles defined as artwork or rare coins or something of that nature. Other than that, pretty much anything goes, though. And again, the entity method is a way it could be done here through Quest. And I'm sorry, Mark, what was the other? Oh, right. So yeah, precious metals, all those things, same thing. Here at Quest, our focus is purely real estate. That's our niche. We don't try to be all things to all people. So it's real estate in the sense of the hard asset, entity, joint venture, syndication, or private lending. As for short-term liquidity, again, that's not what people bring their money here to us for. Cash held with us doesn't even earn interest. So it's definitely not designed to be a place for long-term money. Again, from the experience that I've had with clients, they tend to be in one of two camps. They will either establish a self-directed IRA for the purposes of getting into an investment that they have on the horizon. They may not know what it is, so they may hold back in terms of the funding. But I also see a lot of people who will fund not really with the interest or the consideration of what they're going to earn in the short term, but they know that they need to have their money there because they need to be poised to strike. They need to have that money because a deal may come up, but it may not last very long, and they need to move and move quickly. So, in terms of the liquidity and the earnings, that's kind of where it falls.
It's like we have a question in the back. I'm getting the mic over here to you.
Hi, I'm not sure if this question was mentioned or addressed already, but have there been any changes to IRA RMDs for 2021 that just maybe I'm behind the curve on? Thank you. Well,
Yeah,
for example, in 20, you didn't have to take an RMD because of COVID. Okay.
That's correct.
Yep. Right. Okay. Very good.
Yeah, that hasn't been adjusted at all. And again, I guess just with respect to RMDs, and this is pretty commonly known, but the one significant thing that did happen within the last couple of years is that now it is age 72. It's no longer 70 and a half, which seems such an arbitrary number anyway, but it has at least been pushed back to that.
Okay, a couple more questions.
RMDs don't apply to Roth IRA, right?
Excellent point. Yes, the Roth IRA is the one type of retirement account where a required minimum distribution is not applicable. And that is, in many cases, a very compelling reason why people may make the conversion over from traditional to a Roth IRA. Again, in my background from retirement / financial, / semi estate planning, I would see a lot of people even at older ages who would do conversions over to Roth IRAs, not from the standpoint of personally looking to derive tax-free income for themselves, but rather do it from a legacy standpoint. One of the other qualifiers for getting tax-free money from a Roth IRA, you always have that 5-year holding period that you have to meet, but death is another one of it's another one of the variables that you can utilize for a tax-free distribution. And so while it may not benefit yourself personally because you just died, it would benefit your beneficiaries who then, again, from an estate planning standpoint, can inherit money tax-free.
Awesome. I actually have a question, and this can be for anyone. Just kind of as I was hearing people from the audience, what would you say, how do you really decide if you're an active investor, a passive investor, which one works best for you, whether it's in your self-directed IRA or not?
Very good question that you might ask. I was interested in the possibility of being an active investor, similar to the way Joel is right now today, when I first learned about syndication. However, I was well into my 70s at that point. And so I decided that for me, it was too much responsibility to take other people's money and be responsible for getting them a return. I have been a passive investor, and I've been on that other side, and I've looked at these deals. Hey, what happened to our cash flow that we were supposed to get? Or, hey, we were going to get out of this in 2 years, and now we're looking at 4 years. In other words, I'm glad I'm not under that kind of pressure. I've talked to Joel about it. Joel says it doesn't bother him. So, but there's a possibility if I were where he is, it wouldn't bother me either. I chose not to. So I'm a passive investor, and my passion is to find cash flow passive investments. I'm looking for gasoline money. I want my money to pay. And so I think it depends on what a person's framework is. Now, sometimes he makes a reference, and we talk about active passive investors and an active passive investor. And I have several friends that fall in that category. They do a lot of participation. They still are limited partners in the deal. It limits their risk to the amount of money that they invest. And so they are limited partners. I like being a passive investor. That's what I want to do. And for some people who haven't heard it before, the difference between a deal sponsor and a passive investor is the deal sponsor gets to select the color of paint that goes on the building, and the passive investors like me, we get to look at it, and that's all. We passive investors don't have any role. I mean, any role. It's just like you buy stock in General Motors. You're not telling General Motors what to do. And that's the same thing as a passive investor. So I think you just have to choose where you are and what fits your circumstances at that particular time. He has more responsibility and he takes more risk, and theoretically and hopefully he makes more money as well. But he works really, really hard. I don't work very hard at all. I really don't. Does that kind of answer part of it? Okay. Joe probably has some comments.
Yeah, I can give you my perspective. Sorry, Maurice, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm not sure of this. Maybe you can guide me. Maybe somebody knows. Isn't there an IRS, some kind of definition as to what an investor is, passive or active? Isn't there something that defines that out there?
Absolutely. Yes, there is an IRS definition.
Say that again? That wasn't what I was talking. I understand, but she asked earlier, how do you determine one for the other? And I thought maybe
I don't think the question was, how do you distinguish them? I think the question is, how do you
distinguish?
choose,
I'm sorry.
How do you choose which one you want to be?
I get you. I'm sorry. Then
So just to share my perspective, when I first learned about syndications, I chose to be a passive investor in a number of deals. In fact, before I even really thought about being an active investor, I think I was passive in about half a dozen deals. And I used those deals, first, of course, as investments. I wanted to make money at them. But second, as learning opportunities. So as I was making these passive investments, I was interacting with the sponsors, reading up on syndications in general, on the structures, and the skills that are involved and the tasks that need to be done, and using that education to decide for myself, is it something I want to do? Do I want to be an active investor? Do I want to be the sponsor of the deals that I'm doing, or would I rather just stay passive? And for me, the answer is that I did want to be active. I wanted to be much more involved, and have more control of the investments that I was doing, and also have the opportunity to leverage up my activities, leverage up my influence on the deals that I was doing. Over time, my expectation is that I will want to have more leisure time, and I'll want to spend less time managing investments, and so I will transition back from sponsoring to passive investing. In fact, I call that my retirement glide path. When I get tired of it, when it feels like work, when I don't want to do it anymore, I will just passively invest the rest of my money and stop doing active sponsorships.
Thank you. Sorry for my little throw in there, but I love that question. I love hearing everyone's answers. We have a question over here.
I do. My question is very simple. I've been investing for about 3 years, and I calculate in my head, and my return on investment is about 70% per year. But I'm able to do that because I keep a very low number of projects. I have a maximum of 4 projects at one time. And I'm just wondering, the only way to really grow is to increase the number of investments and projects I think that you have, or get huge projects. But my 4 projects are successful because they are the complete focus of my business transactions. So if you have a large number of investments, which you guys all sound like you have many, many, many investments, how do you organize your decision-making processes in more than just a handful of projects?
As a passive investor, it's not very difficult for me. I make a selection, and by the way, this is not directly, but I'll relate it to everybody. I have a tendency to choose the jockey more than the horse. And what I'm referring to is who the deal sponsor is. If I really know the deal sponsors well, and I've seen them operate over a period of time, and they've been successful, and possibly if I've been in previous deals with them successfully, I'll rely on their judgment to determine whether or not that's a worthwhile project in which to invest. And I invest, and all I have to do is wire them funds. And that's very easy to do. And then I'm through. I don't have to do anything except I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I see when the checks come in, and I make notes of them. But that's about it. I don't do much. So as a passive investor, it's easy for me to spend time riding my bicycle.
Yes, I can answer that both from the passive investor standpoint and the active investor standpoint. As a passive investor, I completely agree with Ken. That phrase, bet on the jockey, not the horse, is really applicable. You look for a sponsor that you feel like you can trust, that is transparent, that gives you the information you're looking for. And to a lesser extent, you can do your due diligence on the deal, but it's really up to you as a passive investor, if you're choosing to be passive, how much time, energy, and skill you want to put into that due diligence. You can just say, hey, I trust this sponsor. If this sponsor is telling me the numbers are good, I'm in. That's a reasonable, that's an approach you can take as a passive investor if you don't want to get deeper into the skill and the knowledge about syndications. But a lot of people go deeper. They will examine the deal. They'll want to understand the asset, the business plan, the team, the market, the market trends. You can get as deep as you want. So that's from the passive perspective. It's a matter, you can choose how much work you want to do. From the active side, absolutely, it's a lot more work per deal. But again, I go back to something that I said earlier. My skill, what I put a lot of stock in is finding great partners. And one of the things I do when I find great partners is I find people who can cover the things that I'm not good at. So whether that's underwriting or managing the asset or raising capital, there's things that I can contribute to the partnership, and then there's things that I rely on my partners to bring to the table. And collectively, as a team, we can manage the assets, we can manage the project. And so when I work with good enough partners, it's not that difficult to take on a few more projects. At some point, I may become bandwidth limited. I may decide, hey, I've got enough projects in my portfolio. I don't want to do any more until I roll out of some of the ones that I've started, but I haven't hit that point yet. And I credit my partners for that.
And again, I think from the investor side, again, I'd echo a lot of what's said. And I guess it comes down to, again, if you have multiple investments, what do those investments entail in terms of the level of attention that they need? And again, kind of to echo Joel, if it is something that's active, it is by nature going to be more labor intensive. But again, the partners that you're working with and the technology that you have at your disposal, be it the record keeping or be it just the platform that you work on, can make a big difference as much as anything else. So, and I'll use this as a shameless plug, but just again, anecdotally from what I've gotten from our clients, the use of something like our client portal has made the process so much simpler for so many people, where they can just go online, they can just get payments directed. All they have to do is just upload whatever the document is to support it. And they find that the process moves very quickly, easily. So many things can be automated nowadays that it really can, with just some very basic organization, really become a lot easier to manage regardless of the type of investments that you have.
Awesome. Great points.
Absolutely. Right. So yeah, the point was made about IRAs and the fact that the tax filing, is only required if there's money coming out. And again, that's part of one of our responsibilities, is to take care of the annual filings on your behalf, or, as part of what we do as administrator.
All right, so we probably have time for maybe one more question if we have it. Going once, going twice. All right, well, I will do one more announcement for QuestCon, our Forecasting 2020 event. If you do want to get signed up, like I said, we have some Quest staff in the back that can help you out. But thank you guys for coming tonight. We love putting on these educational events for you. Like I said, we do webinars. We do this one once a month. We love to bring out guest speakers, local and from across the nation. So be sure to check out the calendar and our newsletters that we have going out. And if you do want to get in contact with an IRA specialist, if something here piqued your interest, we'd love to talk to you. You can either scan this QR code, give us a call, send us an email. We are readily accessible for you guys. And thank you so much to all of our panelists, Steve, Joel, and Ken here for joining us and sharing their knowledge. If you'd like to, feel free to just network. Feel free. We'll be here for a little bit longer. Thank you so much.
Levitating, pop stars, do a leap with the baby. I had to lace my shoes for all the blessings I was chasing.